and it's my great pleasure to welcome you to our 11th Lancet Palestinian Health Alliance meeting. We are virtual, but it's no less impressive or exciting for that. Our gathering is spread over 4 days with the very best research from Palestinian health researchers. Today, we're going to have some welcomes to you all. We're then going to go into the first scientific session on the Great March of Return, and then we'll have a short break and follow on with 2 sessions looking at political violence. This annual event is brought to you with the tremendous leadership of the Institute for Community and Public Health at Birzeit University and the Faculty of Health Sciences at the American University of Beirut, our long-standing friends and partners. Please remember to mute yourself, except when you're speaking, and the transitioning between speakers will happen magically by our wonderful LPHA coordination team. So let's start with some welcomes, and it's a real pleasure to begin by welcoming again our long-standing committed friend, the president of Birzeit University, Professor Abdullatif Hijjleh. Professor, please.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you. It's a pleasure seeing you and see all of our friends and colleagues. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure today to welcome you to the 11th Lancet Palestinian Health Alliance Conference. Thank you all for joining remotely. Yes, we are all experiencing an unprecedented situation with the global pandemic, a virus not visible to the naked eyes has put the world on pause. So much has changed in the way we live and do things. At Birzeit University, we have had to accommodate these exceptional circumstances quickly and move towards working from remote, social distancing, and sanitization. We made it, even though we in Palestine are seriously constrained by the controls and the technological access by the occupier, and so much else. Ladies and gentlemen, this virus has taught us that only a global solution underpinned by solidarity and swift action can counter its forces. So we are here gathering to attend the 11th Lancet Palestinian Health Alliance Conference virtually, in spite of the delay of the conference in 2020, because we do our best when we do it together. I would therefore like to thank all of you for joining us today as we celebrate not only holding the 11th LPHA conference despite odds, but also celebrate our collective resilience, solidarity, and will move on. With that, I wish all a most successful and impactful virtual conference, and I look forward to hearing your discussions and see its outcomes. Thank you for listening. I wish you success in this very important conference. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you very much indeed. Wonderful, warm welcome, and I very much look forward, I hope soon, to a further visit to your beautiful university, which really we do admire so much. It's now my great pleasure to introduce a short video from the Minister of Health in the occupied Palestinian territory, Dr. Mai AlKaila.
Good morning, everybody. Dr. Abdullatif Husseini, President of Birzeit University. Dear Dr. Richard Horton, Lancet, UK. Dr. Iman Wahid from the American University of Beirut. Dr. Graham Watt, Glasgow University, UK. Dr. Jennifer Leaning, Harvard University, USA. Esteemed organizers of this honorable conference for the Lancet Palestinian Health Alliance, esteemed guests and researchers, welcome to Palestine for those who arrived to Palestine or are guests on Zoom in Palestine. It's my pleasure to be with you today in your 11th conference for the Lancet Palestinian Health Alliance, which presents an important event for the health research on the national, regional, and international level. The Palestinian Ministry of Health confirms its full support for different initiatives of health research that is based on scientific methods and supports the sustainability and development of the Palestinian health sector and provides the needed evidence for best practices and policy-making decisions. We believe that health research on both academic and practical level is the best approach for identifying critical problems and weaknesses in the health sector, keeping up the global health development for treatment and prevention of diseases, shedding light on the influence of the determinants of health. Health researchers play a valuable role in policy making to support evidence-based policies and precise decisions. They present the guidance for policy solutions for different health problems, estimate the costs and consequences of policy proposals. Health research has become much more important during the last year due to the COVID-19 pandemic, where all public health researchers and medical and social scientists has been racing time to fight this pandemic in different ways, including clinical trials on possible therapeutics for this novel coronavirus serological studies, studies for developing safe and effective COVID-19 vaccine. All these studies and research were targeting one goal of containing the spread of the coronavirus pandemic and help care for those affected. In this regard, the local health research trend also would help to explore the best practices for managing and controlling the pandemic, experiences learned to be more prepared for any possible crisis in the future. Ladies and gentlemen, in the Palestinian health context, public health research is considered more important due to the complicated social and economic living conditions caused by the long years of Israeli occupation and constant emergency situation, synchronized with limited resources and different public health problems and challenges of increasing rates of non-communicable diseases, increasing rates of morbidity and injuries, causing increasing demand on health services, in addition to the global raises of health services and medical technology costs. Such challenges has made public health research more and more valuable in order to support evidence-based policy-making process and best use of limited resources, supports the national efforts for strengthening the Palestinian health system and achieving our national health objectives of nationalization of health services, improving quality of services, access to health services for all citizens, especially the vulnerable groups, and moving towards universal health coverage in Palestine. Finally, great thanks for organizers of this important conference, the Institute of Community and Public Health at Birzeit University, the Faculty of Health Sciences at the American University of Beirut, and different national and international researchers participating in this conference. And wish you all great success and looking for valuable recommendations for the Palestinian health sectors and the well-being of the Palestinians inside and outside the occupied Palestinian territory. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Minister. It's now a great pleasure to introduce somebody who's been with us from the very, very beginning of this enterprise, Professor Graham Watts from the University of Glasgow in Scotland. And Graham is going to talk about the celebration of solidarity and collegiality among the Lancet Palestinian Health Alliance. Over to you, Graham.
Hi, Richard. I'm just getting the screen share up and running. 2 ticks. Can you see that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Or as we're still saying in Scotland, where I'm speaking from, good morning. It's a pleasure to be speaking to the LPHA, friends and colleagues once again, although it's unusual to be doing so from over 4,000 kilometres away on the other side of Europe. I'm much nearer, only 80 kilometres from Edinburgh, the capital city of Scotland, sometimes called the Athens of the North. And on the Royal Mile, the city's most famous street, there's an old entrance shown on the right, and above the entrance, if you look closely, there is some fancy stonework. And here it is close up, showing the head of a young man and a quotation. Heave a wa chaps, I'm no deed yet, which is Scottish for keep working boys, I'm not dead yet. 160 years ago, in 1861, the building had collapsed due not to an Israeli rocket, but faulty construction. And 80 people died in the wreckage. While rescuers were looking through the rubble, they saw a hand. And when they held the hand, a voice rang out, "Heave a wa chaps, I'm no dead yet." A 13-year-old boy who lost both his parents in the tragedy survived and has been immortalized in stone. And so the theme of this short presentation is survival. We're especially pleased to record the survival of Richard Horton, editor of the Lancet and inspirational leader of the LPHA, who missed the last conference in Amman due to major illness and has been living and working under that uncertainty ever since. It's a pleasure to have him with us here today as further evidence of his steadfast commitment to the LPHA. Thank you, Richard. The LPHA has survived during lockdown. The conference in November had to be postponed, but a webinar on Palestinian experience of COVID-19 was held on the 4th of November last year with 278 participants on the day and over 23,000 catching up afterwards on social media, which is more than 14 times the number of attendees at LPHA conferences altogether. Food for thought. And here are some well-known faces on that Zoom. The speakers included Richard Horton, Dr. Mai AlKaila, Minister of Health, Professors Abdullatif Husseini from Birzeit and Nia Daoud from Inside the Green Line, and Gerard Rockenschraub from the WHO. The LPHA steering group has also been active, seen here top left at their meeting after the last conference in 2019, and also down below bottom right, meeting by Zoom earlier this year. The steering group doesn't generally speak publicly, but in February it felt justified, based on 10 years research experience in the OPT, in making 2 points in a letter to the Lancet. First, that via its occupation, economic siege, and military attacks, Israel is complicit in the weakness of the Palestine healthcare system and thus its vulnerability to a surge of clinical cases. Second, that whatever legal and technical arguments Israel has used to deny its responsibilities as an occupying force, the reality of the occupation is plain to see. On both these grounds, Israel has a moral and ethical obligation to help with the supply of vaccines for the Palestinian population. Almost immediately on publication of this letter, the editor received a flood of emails criticizing its publication. But it was soon followed by a flood of emails in support of the publication, neutralizing the attack on the editor and the journal, and showing that the LPHA membership, with other Palestinian networks, has the capacity to respond quickly and effectively to such attacks. So here we are for the 11th LPHA conference, the first to be held virtually, and adding 231 new research abstracts submissions. That's nearly 1,600 since 2010, of which over 800 have been or are being presented, of which nearly a half have been published in the Lancet, including 52 from the last Amman conference published in the Lancet website this month. The 231 abstracts submitted for this conference were each assessed by 3 reviewers from a pool of 29 reviewers. 18 were Palestinian, 11 international. Their scores were ranked and the top 27 selected for oral presentation, the next 65 for presentation as posters. The 27 oral presentations are spread across 11 sessions and themes. The numbers in yellow are as originally selected, and the numbers in blue, virtually the same, are included in the program over the next few days. You'll understand that not every author still wished to present. The 65 posters covered 12 themes. The numbers in yellow as originally selected, and the 40 in blue still being presented. These 40 posters have been on display on the ICPH website at Birzeit University for the last month. There's no time to discuss posters during the conference, but every poster has the author's email address, and you're welcome to correspond if you wish. We shall announce the 3 best posters on Thursday. Colleagues in Gaza have been the most productive. 3/4 of the presentations are from the OPT, the rest from 2 regional and 8 overseas countries. None from Lebanon, as the conference was originally planned for Birzeit, which of course Lebanese colleagues could not attend. For virtual future conferences, that won't be a consideration. The Islamic University of Gaza and the universities of An-Najjar, Birzeit, and Al-Quds continue to be the main Palestinian universities represented, top right, with smaller numbers of abstracts from Hebron, Bethlehem, and other universities and colleges, plus abstracts from many organizations, but especially UNRWA and the Ministries of Health in the West Bank and Gaza. First authors show the usual mix of local and international researchers, academics and non-academics, young and old. Nearly 50% are female, 32% are students, and 28% are aged under 30. All good signs for the future. Of course, the abstracts submitted for this conference 18 months ago were based on a research carried out before that, before the COVID pandemic, and 2 years before the recent attacks on Gaza. And for that reason, we included 2 additional presentations in this session from Jennifer Leaning and Abdullatif Husseini, reflecting on issues posed by the pandemic. Unfortunately, Jennifer, at a very late stage, has had to withdraw because of illness. We send her our very best wishes. In summary, the LPHA, like the Palestine people, has a talent for survival. It continues as a loose network of Palestinian, regional and international researchers committed to the highest international standards in describing, analysing and evaluating the health and healthcare of Palestinians, contributing to the international scientific literature and developing local evidence-based policy and practice, which it does by presentation and publication of research-based findings, advocacy based on science, the development of scientific methods that are culture specific, increased capacity for research, including mentoring, and increased collaboration within the OPT, Lebanon, across the region and worldwide. So the LPHA is not only not dead yet, it is alive and kicking. Welcome to the 11th LPHA conference, wherever you are. Richard.
Graham, wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you. Give you a big round of applause for that. That was excellent. And thank you for your lovely Scottish story at the beginning, which I think resonates with us all. As has been mentioned, of course, we are meeting still in the midst of a pandemic, and it's a great pleasure to introduce Professor Abdullatif Husseini, who's going to give you an overview of COVID-19 across the occupied Palestinian territory. Over to you, Abed.
Thank you very much, Richard. Can you see me and hear me?
We can.
Okay, great. Good afternoon. I am Abdullatif Husseini from Birzeit University. I would like to start by thanking the organizers for inviting me to speak about the epidemiology of COVID-19 in Palestine, what we know and what we need to know. I would like to acknowledge also the help of my colleague at Birzeit, Rola Gandour. To start with, I would like to highlight some points. Most of the data used in the current presentation were obtained from the MOH COVID-19 surveillance system, and most of it were obtained on the July 5th, just to keep you a week apart. And due to data sharing restrictions, some disaggregated data for Jerusalem Al-Quds by age and gender were not available. So just to get you warmed up about this very important issue. What we'll be talking about today is the general epi of COVID-19 in the OPT, time trends, age distribution, transmission methods, testing for COVID-19, hospital-related data, vaccination, and then we have some points to discuss. This slide in the table, it summarizes the general epidemiologic picture in Palestine as of the 5th of July, 2021. As you can see, we had around 343,000 cases in total, 337,000 recovered, 3,841 deaths, and 2,223 active cases. And then this is the distribution in the West Bank, in the Gaza Strip, and in Jerusalem. Just to give you a taste, this slide shows an example of recently reported daily new cases on July 5th. So in the West Bank, we had around 21 cases. In the Southern Governorate, which is Gaza Strip, 56 cases, and none were reported in Jerusalem. Okay. So it is evident from the figure that you are looking at in front of you that we had 3 peaks in front of us. This is the daily confirmed cases without Jerusalem city. A similar figure which shows the daily active cases in Jerusalem. And here is a figure which shows the cumulative confirmed cases of COVID-19. I try to draw a figure looking at the confirmed cases by month. And as you can see in front of you, in March 2021, we had the highest number of cases. And the second one was December 2020 where we had more than 50,000 cases in each of those 2 months. This is, of course, for the West Bank and Gaza Strip without Jerusalem. This one is for Jerusalem, and as you can see, the highest number of cases was reported in February 2021. The sex distribution, as you can see, it's almost equal. So at least the numbers are gender sensitive here. When we look at the age distribution, most of the confirmed cases were in the age group 20 to 29. When we look at the effective reproduction number in Palestine, it was estimated to be 0.88 on June 18th. And actually, I just checked again, and we have results from July the 2nd, and it is exactly the same 0.88. So it seems that to a certain extent, the COVID-19 epidemic in Palestine is under control for now. But we should say that very cautiously and with a grain of salt. Looking at the transmission methods, it's clear that the community transmission is the largest by far. And again, to remind you about the distribution of COVID cases by status on July the 5th, as you can see here, 98 point something from the cases have recovered. We have the deaths 1.14% and the active cases 0.71%. These are the cumulative confirmed COVID-19 deaths in Palestine. And in this figure, I try to draw the number of cases and the number of deaths in each age group. And I will go on to show you the case fatality in a minute. This is the case fatality rate of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic in Palestine. And as you can see, it is around 1.14. Probably you are interested in looking at the age-specific case fatality rates. And I think the figure is very clear and similar to other countries. As expected, the highest case fatality rates were in the older age groups. The testing for COVID-19 in Palestine, the numbers are here on your left-hand side, and I think we need to do a lot about the testing. We need to increase the coverage. The main method that we are using is the nasopharyngeal swab, PCR. We do some antigen and some antibody testing, but again, there is a need for a much higher coverage, as I will show you when I compare with other countries in the region. Looking at the last 6 months and comparing the Gaza Strip with the West Bank, the positivity rate in the Gaza Strip was higher. But we need to take a further look into the details of this. As you can see here, in the West Bank, it was higher a bit in the beginning, and then it started increasing in Gaza, while it was going down in the West Bank. Now in the West Bank, it's actually low. It's around 1%, while it's still, although it went down, but it is still high in the Gaza Strip with about 13%. Again, you need to look at these numbers conservatively and to understand the criteria for testing, because we have, as I have said before, very limited resources for testing. This is the share of COVID-19 tests that are positive, and I think there is a very clear trend of going down in both the West Bank and Gaza, but more rapidly in the West Bank. In Gaza, it's still not low enough. Hospital-related data, we have available hospital-related data about COVID-19 in Palestine, although it is limited. The Ministry of Health announces every day the number of patients in intensive care unit and on respirators in the daily press release. The Ministry of Health in collaboration with partners, is working now to develop COVID surveillance system and to provide more hospital-related and clinical data. The availability of such data is very important for us, and it will allow us to take better informed decisions and based on the evidence. Okay. I don't know why my slide froze. No, let me just go up. Okay. Regarding the immunization, we have started our immunization now. As of the 5th of July, we had 516,404 vaccinated persons. So about 10% got 1 or 2 doses, and about 7% got both doses, the 2 doses. I think this slide is very important and shows the very big difference between immunization in Palestine. For example, it is still much less than Jordan, but much less than Israel, and it is something that we need to think about. This table just gives you a brief comparison with the neighboring Arab countries, Jordan and Lebanon. Those countries are similar to Palestine in many aspects. As you can see, the cases per million are less in Palestine than Jordan and Lebanon. The deaths in Palestine is less than Jordan and Lebanon. And of course, negatively, the tests are much less. So again, we should look at this data very conservatively. Again, going for the comparison, these are the daily new confirmed COVID cases per million people. And as you can see, it is going down in the 3 countries in Jordan, Lebanon, and Palestine. And these are the COVID tests per 1,000 people. And you can see the big discrepancy between Palestine having much lesser tests than Jordan doing a bit better, but much more tests due to, our countries, especially Palestine, is facing a lot of financial constraints, although we are doing our best, but we need to focus on this and increase the testing and increase the immunization, of course. These are the daily new confirmed COVID deaths per million people. And again, it's going down in the 3 countries, Jordan, Palestine, and Lebanon. Now going for the discussion, just to summarize and wrap up what I have said, information about COVID-19 and SARS-CoV-2 are limited in Palestine. The current epidemiological situation in Palestine, including the number of new cases, probably includes some underestimation due to the limited coverage of testing. Although the current incidence and mortality rates from COVID-19 is relatively low, we should be vigilant about how the situation may change very rapidly. Regionally, we are observing an increasing spread of COVID-19 variants in some countries, including neighboring countries. And the risk of a new wave of COVID-19 in the coming weeks or months is a possibility that we should be prepared for. This becomes especially true with our limited resources that we have in terms of treatment, ICU beds, respirators, vaccination, etc. In terms of the available and lacking data, I want to stress this point because I think it is important. Some important basic descriptive data regarding COVID-19 are available and accessible through the MOH and other Palestinian websites. However, we need much more specific data, especially those related to hospitalization, ICU, respirators, testing, and vaccination to be available for the public. The format for data provision can also be improved by including formats that allow observing change over time and time trends. The data accessibility, sharing, transparency, and accountability are important points that we as Palestinians and our colleagues and experts should discuss and address. I would like to finish my talk by a wise word from a wise man, at least in my opinion. Dr. Anthony Fauci lays out 3 future scientific communicators that they can build on. First, always go by the data. Second, admit when you don't know something. And the goal is not to show how smart you are. It is to get people to understand what you are talking about. I hope I try to do this as much as possible in my talk. To pile up, I think that COVID-19 has shown us how much we don't know and made us very humble. It helped us to understand the need to change and correct our previous assumptions and conclusions and statements continuously. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Abed. Stay with us because we have a few minutes and I wondered if I could just ask a couple of questions.
Sure, sure.
What is the position with regards to access to genomic sequencing? Is there any at all? Because obviously tracking these new variants is absolutely crucial for translating data, as you rightly put an emphasis on, into policy.
Yes, I think that this is a very good question, and we do have some access through some Palestinian universities, mainly the Arab American University of Jenin is collaborating with the Ministry of Health to do that. I don't have detailed information, but at least we do have some local capacity to do that.
Okay, that's very good news to hear, actually. And I wonder if that's the case, I'm suspecting not, in Gaza.
Well, I think Khamis can say, give an answer for that.
We have.
You do? Khamis, do you have access to genomic sequencing in Gaza?
Yeah, in fact, we have at the Islamic University, we have a genomic sequence lab. The ingredients and some of these solutions, some certain gadgets or equipments that makes it not doable here in Gaza. So they don't do it. They send it to a central laboratory in Ramallah to do it. But they have the equipments, they have it here in the Islamic University.
Okay, okay. All right, thank you very much indeed. Abed, that was fantastic.
Thank you.
Really great presentation to give us the context of the pandemic and our discussions this week. Well, with your permission, I have a few reflections that I would just like to offer myself.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you. Critics of the Lancet's engagement with Palestine often ask why. Why do we have the Lancet Palestinian Health Alliance? Why the focus on Palestine and not other crises and conflicts around the world? Why do you have this seeming obsession with Palestine? Well, of course, these critics obviously don't read the Lancet to see the coverage that we give to many other health issues around the world. But that answer is far too defensive because it is a fact that needs to be repeated again and again, that the occupation of the Palestinian territory is without question the world's most polarizing geopolitical confrontation today. As the Palestinian historian Rashid Khaladi puts it, this conflict represents a 100-year war on Palestine. The occupation, which passed its 50th anniversary in 2017, has prevented the full realization of Palestinian hopes to achieve a functioning state, and so has denied Palestinians their right to healthcare and to health. The occupation has denied Palestinians the right to build a health system, and so to offer a full range of care and compassion to its citizens. The occupation has denied Palestinians the right to build an education system, to realize fully a thriving scientific culture that would enable Palestinians to fulfill their right to the benefits of science. Now, occupation is not merely a legal reality, it is also an everyday experience undermining the health and well-being of Palestinians. It is a continuum of coercion and violence that causes physical, mental, and social injury and harm, as does the ongoing colonization of Palestinian land. Indeed, that is the main reason why, in the words of the American Middle East specialist Gershon Shafir, the clash between Israelis and Palestinians is the world's most intransigent conflict. That is why we have the Lancet Palestinian Health Alliance, to shine a light onto the health consequences of that conflict. Now, in May this year, at a virtual World Health Assembly event, we held our 8th UNRWA WHO Lancet meeting to analyze the current human crisis in Palestine with a particular emphasis on Gaza. We're usually confined to a hotel room in Geneva with around 100 participants, but the pandemic turned our gathering into an opportunity to project the acute on chronic crisis in Gaza into an international event. We were privileged to have Dr. Mai AlKaila again, as she was with us today. She spoke there as Minister of Health, and she explained how the recent attacks on Gaza had not only killed 66 children and 39 women, but also displaced an astonishing 90,000 Gazans. Incredibly, 90 attacks took place on 30 health clinics, causing significant damage to health infrastructure across Gaza. Rick Pieperkorn, who is the head of WHO's office in the occupied Palestinian territory, described his staff's anger, frustration, and grief over the attacks on Gazans, and he emphasized the important obligation of the World Health Organization, as they have done, to report the damage to health facilities and schools. WHO's obligation to describe the blast injuries, the effects of live ammunition, the barriers to access for health workers, and even the damage to COVID-19 testing labs in the middle of a pandemic. WHO's key asks, he said, which remain unfulfilled, were unhindered access to those in need of healthcare, respect and protection, and a more muscular international humanitarian and development response. Dr. Rana Hajj from WHO's Eastern Mediterranean Regional Office emphasized that no health worker should ever fear losing their life. And yet, Dr. Randa Zakut from the UNRWA field program working in Gaza described, in her words, the agonizing pain of being under attack, moving from room to room as bombs rained down on them, and unconscionably the killing of key medical staff. I would like to pay particular respect to the lives of 2 of those medical health workers who lost their lives in those attacks. Dr. Ayman Abu Alouf, age 49, head of the Department of Internal Medicine at Al-Shifa Hospital and the clinician in charge of its COVID-19 unit, killed by an air attack on Gaza City on May the 16th. And Dr. Muin Ahmad Al-Alul, age 66, a psychiatrist and specialist in addiction services, who was killed when a bomb destroyed his home. You will find their obituaries published in the Lancet on June the 26th this year. The murder of George Floyd on May the 20th, 2020 in Minneapolis drew attention to the continuing influence of structural racism in our societies. And the departure of the editor-in-chief of the Journal of the American Medical Association after a podcast alleged falsely that racism plays little part in medicine underscored the growing awareness of racial inequality in shaping patterns of health and disease. Racism is indeed a public health crisis, and racial inequality, with its origins in colonialism, has now been catapulted to the forefront of medicine and healthcare. This framing of colonialism and racial inequality has important implications for the way the international community can better understand the Palestinian predicament. In order to dismantle racist colonial structures in society and healthcare, we must see race. And to see race requires us to describe the way power and prejudice shape the experiences of those subject to racism. The quest for a functioning health system in the occupied Palestinian territory, for better healthcare, for the right to health, and for the right to the benefits of science is therefore fundamentally about the redistribution of power. And that means that anti-racist work in the context of the Palestinian occupation needs to be led by Palestinians who experience racial injustice. And this, I hope, is where the LPHA has a part to play. The LPHA aims to put power in the hands of Palestinians themselves, to describe their own reality, their own story, their own experiences, to give Palestinians a platform in their narrative of nationhood and in the history of health and health science. Typically, as Rashid Khaladi points out, and I quote, "The great powers have repeatedly tried to act in spite of the Palestinians, ignoring them, talking for them, or over their heads, or pretending they did not exist." And yet societies can only be as just as the knowledge on which they are built. And there is a direct line, admittedly not always a straight line, but a direct line nevertheless, between knowledge and justice, between knowledge and decolonization, and between knowledge and self-determination. The goals of the Lancet Palestinian Health Alliance to supplement Graham's are to reconstruct and reconstitute knowledge about Palestinian lives as a commitment to decolonization, to challenge false assumptions about life under occupation, siege, and as refugees, and to undermine the conservative tendencies of epidemiology to view the causes of ill health in damagingly narrow ways, and to devolve scientific authority from traditional sources of control. These are modest goals, but now in our 11th year, thanks to your unwavering support, which I thank you from the bottom of my heart for, they are goals that motivate and animate the LPHA more than ever. Thank you very much for being with us today.